held assumptions about life are not universally shared, and that was certainly the case for us. We discovered we had some very different expectations.
We want to give you two relatively small examples right now from our own marriage of where our different expectations caused quite a bit of tension between us early on. The first one had to do with our car.
So when we got married, I expected that Nicky would keep our car filled up with fuel. I'd never owned a car and I thought cars were more his thing. But also, I think it was because of my parents' marriage. It was my dad who always filled their car up with fuel. In fact, he never let the fuel go. Made the journey more exciting, and after quite a lot of stress from me and running out of fuel a few times, I realized I could perfectly well fill the car up myself.
The second example of where different assumptions have created some tension over the years is around what happens when things in our house break or stop working. My father was very good at mending things, so when something wasn't working at home, my parents never called a plumber or electrician or whoever. My father would fix it himself.
My father, on the other hand, had many gifts, but he was totally impractical. He wouldn't even change a plug. He'd rather get the electrician. So my instinct, if something breaks, is to get a professional round to fix it as soon as possible.
And that really upsets me, first because of how much it'll cost, but also because it deprives me of the satisfaction of having a go at trying to mend it myself.
Which then really frustrates me, as Nicky just may not have time to look at it for several weeks.
We didn't realise why these issues caused so much tension between us until we reflected on the different expectations we'd inherited from our upbringing.
Now, of course, there are likely to be much more serious differences to deal with, especially if you come from different cultures. And it'll be a great help for your relationship to be aware of the different expectations and to discuss them early on. And we'll give you plenty of opportunities to do that during this course.
Being able to talk openly and honestly about our differences is vital if we're to have a strong marriage.
Your upbringing, right? So it sort of affects your outlook on life.
Certainly there's like a lot of like cultural differences.
How so?
How so?
Our families, one is in Italy, one is in South Korea. It's a completely two different worlds.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of times you're.
Some of our families are very different.
Yes, we're very quiet, we're very practical, we're not much fun to be around with.
Whereas my family is like a drama.
I guess like a little bit unusual.
Okay, so what socially awkward things have I done?
My family is super foodie and respectful on the table. And
my family is dead opposite of whatever a family is.
It was always important for my dad that we should have dinner together every night. So I assumed every household was like that. Man, was I mistaken.
So now we want to give you an opportunity to have a conversation just between the two of you. We'd like you to take your journals and turn to the first conversation, different expectations. See if you can identify one different expectation you have that's the result of your upbringing or different cultural backgrounds. Tell each other what comes to mind. And we've put some ideas in your journal to get you started.
Good communication is a foundational and vital aspect of any healthy relationship, and it involves both talking effectively and listening effectively. All of us have to learn and go on learning how to be good communicators. And marriage is probably the best training ground, not least because it's the most challenging. One of the most helpful things to recognize at the outset is that we're all different in the way we communicate.
And we want to look at two factors in particular that dictate our communication style: our personality and our background. So first of all, our personality. We each have a unique and different personality. The Bible describes us all as being remarkably and wonderfully made. And it's worth trying to recognize where each of us comes on a spectrum between different extremes. Some people are more extroverted, and in terms of communication, they may well process their thoughts externally. In other words, they tend to think out loud. Other people are more introverted. They'll probably tend towards organizing their thoughts in their heads first before they speak.
Andy's so extroverted, like you just love to chat, you love talking. I'm more introverted, it's kind of like a bit of time to myself. In the mornings, Andy would wake up and just be like, hey, how are you? What did you dream about?
Well, I feel like I've had 8 hours by myself when I'm asleep, so you want to be around people again, don't you?
But it would wind me up. Like, I just felt so claustrophobic. I was like, he's like invading my privacy, and now you want to invade my subconscious. Like, my dreams aren't even my own anymore.
We are very different. He's an extreme extrovert. I would want to just be by myself, have time to think. He just loves a party. He's very easygoing, go with the flow. I'm extremely good at time management.
I'm a very sort of high energy whirlwind of a personality, and Tony's way more laid back. So very much that wanting him to have, more plans and more energy and more, and I'm looking at him like, you're on a break.
And as you can see, hers is a mile a minute. And I'm like, whoa, slow your roll, babe. Slow your roll. Back it up a little bit.
He's always telling me I need to take a nap. And I'm like, I don't need no nap.
He's more outgoing. I'm not, I'm, again, very shy.
We're completely opposites.
Little things I'm like, you like this food? No, of course not, because I love it.
But we've learned that the things that make us so different are actually our strengths.
我是急性子，做什么事情说了立马就去行动的。
是我呢是在做之前我要花很多时间去思考，之后再去做。
比如说我们两个商量一起来去收拾屋子打扫房间，我说这样我去收拾卧室，你来收拾客厅。然后10几分钟过去以后，我把卧室已经收拾干净出来了，他还在沙发上想我从哪里开始。
Another way people can differ in their communication style is that some people are more analytical. They work things out methodically and may take a long time to make decisions, while other people are more intuitive. They act on hunches and can jump to conclusions, which may well turn out to be right. As the course progresses, you'll probably realize that I tend towards being more analytical and more introverted.
Whereas I am more of an extrovert and more intuitive. So that's about as different as you can get.
And if Zula's worried about something, she needs to talk it out as soon as possible. But she may still be in the process of working out what she thinks. So she often says something to me with great passion and conviction, but she's quite likely to change her mind 5 minutes later and express another view with equal passion and conviction. So I've discovered over the years it's better not to react too quickly.
Meanwhile, Nicky likes time and space to sort out an issue in his head first, on his own, and then tell me what he thinks. At which point I say, well, that's not really a discussion, that's just your conclusion.
So, as you can see, before we've even started to express our own points of view, our ways of communicating are very different because of our different personalities.
Let me give you an example. We were in the car together not long ago, and I thought it was a great opportunity to chat to Nicky about a big family party we were planning in Scotland, where my family live. There were lots of relatives coming of all ages. And as I like processing my thoughts out loud, I wanted him to help me to work out the dynamics of who should sit next to whom at dinner. So I was talking away, hoping for his input and suggestions, but he was very quiet. So after a while, I stopped and asked him what he thought. He looked slightly embarrassed and admitted he hadn't really been listening to what I'd been saying. He told me that he'd been trying to work out in his head how much it was going to cost to get up to Scotland for the party and whether it was cheaper to drive or go on the train. So our different communication styles can be quite frustrating at times for both of us.
In the end, I worked out it was going to be cheaper to fly.
It's time for another conversation. We've told you about ourselves. Nikki likes to think it out, while I like to talk it out. We want you to turn in your journal to the conversation how we communicate. Now, each of you take a few minutes to tell your partner how you think their personality affects the way they communicate. Do they tend towards being more extroverted or more introverted? More analytical or more intuitive? The second thing that affects our communication is our family background. No two families are the same. Some families are quiet, other families are much louder. Some families air disagreements immediately, others delay or avoid talking about conflicting views at all. Some are more volatile, others are calmer. In some families, where they take it in turns to talk, interrupting is seen as rude, whereas in another family, talking over each other and interrupting is a sign of interest, and not to interrupt is seen as being bored or unconcerned. Nikki and my families had quite different styles of communication. My family was definitely of the loud variety and could be quite volatile, while Nikki's was rather quieter and calmer. And the most obvious time to see that was at mealtimes.
Yeah, I remember vividly the first time I met Scylla's family, and the first meal I had with them was very interesting.
My family tended to talk at the top of their voices all at once while eating at 100 miles an hour.
I wasn't used to that. I would put my knife and fork down while I talked, and as I was the new boyfriend, her family was asking me loads of questions, and by the time they'd all finished, I was only on my second mouthful.
So we all had to sit and wait for him to finish, which felt like forever. And then my mother offered him a second helping. And I think Nikki wanted to make a good impression to show that he liked my mother's cooking. So he accepted. At which point we were stuck there for at least another 15 minutes with me thinking, oh no, this is a nightmare.
My name's William, and I think fun is the #1 thing that attracted me to Steph.
What first attracted me to William was that he split his food with me. And then as time went on, I think I was just attracted to that sort of giving, selfless person that he is. I think our families are very different. He came from a big family, a very boisterous family, a high conflict family. I came from a family that was only 2 kids, very quiet. I remember the first time we went to your parents' house, and they're just sitting around talking and talking and talking, and the time is just like going on and on. And I love his parents, but goodness gracious, let's go to bed, people. And finally, I called it at, I think it was 11. I said, I'm gonna go to bed, and they all kind of looked at me like, you're going to bed? Yeah, I mean, it's only 11.
Story time's just started.
Story time has just begun. And they know that at like 9 o'clock, I say, see you later, everybody. And when you would go to my family, it was like, we only saw you for an hour. So we had meal together, that was enough time.
Yeah, it was like, well, it was good catching up. Now everyone, let's go their separate ways. Where my family, I'd be like, okay, well, we just had a 2-hour meal together.
What else can we do together?
Let's go retire to the living room and just talk some more.
We're going to give you a chance now to think about the way your own family communicated as you were growing up. And then you'll be able to look at whether this is different to your partner's experience. Please turn in your journal to the next conversation, Family Styles of Communication. First, mark with an X where you think your own family comes on the lines between the 2 extremes. Each of you, do this on your own and then discuss with your partner what you've put. We want to look now at 3 hindrances to good communication in a marriage and how we can overcome them. The first and most common hindrance is failing to make time.
Perhaps the best investment we can make for our relationship is to set aside time regularly for meaningful conversation. Nikki and I discovered pretty early on in our relationship that this sort of time doesn't just happen. Our experience is that we have to plan it into our lives to make sure that we stay connected with each other. That might mean making time in the morning to connect before we go to work, or in the evening to catch up on our day. And it's involved having regular date nights.
The best bit of advice we were given when we were first married and life was incredibly busy was to organise a date once a week. And we've kept this up for over 40 years, and it's made a huge difference to our communication. And on session 4, we'll talk more about the benefits of date nights in a marriage.
Now, planning quality time like this is important, but so too is guarding this time from things that will distract and interrupt us. One of the greatest hindrances to meaningful conversation today is screens, especially our phones. A couple can be physically together, but fail to connect with each other emotionally.
So now, when Scylla and I are having a meal together or having our date night, we put our phones on silent and put them out of sight so that we're not constantly distracted by the interruption of its sounds or notifications.
We recognise that making time for meaningful connection is more challenging in certain circumstances. For example, if as a couple you have different working patterns, particularly if one of you has to travel with your work a lot, or if you have small children and it's no longer just the two of you, or perhaps you're going through emotionally challenging circumstances like struggling to start a family or facing an illness or financial or work difficulties. In these situations, communication and connection are all the more important.
Take 5, marker.
One of the pressures that has happened was when my sister died. She was 26 at the time, and she had a 6-year-old boy, and she died very, very suddenly. We then went through a court process to gain parental rights of my nephew, who is our eldest son. But that was a huge strain.
It was a defining moment.
Yeah. I think we learned to communicate even more during that period.
It just changed life, really. But I think that was probably the biggest trial we've been through, isn't it? But I think, as I say, having the foundation in the early days of communication, I think the payoff is later in life when things like that happen, is that you've already laid the groundwork for being able to talk because the groundwork was laid.
Yeah.
It's not been easy, but it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
When we first got married, and at different points in our marriage, we've had very different schedules. So I was working 9 to 5, Kate was working as an actress, and you were working evenings. And so often I would come home and you'd have been by yourself most of the day.
All day.
And so you needed to talk to people, and I just needed to be like, oh, I just need to be quiet. So there was a time where you'd be getting back from a show at 11 p.m. and I'd be like, I'm going to sleep.
And it is that. Naming it, saying it what it is, and then prioritizing times to talk. Like setting that time in.
I think working out date night as well, being really flexible on it. So it might have just been a lunch where you'd come in and we'd have lunch together at a work time, or there would be flexibility in my work. So we would just setting the bar really low during those crazy seasons, but making sure we were doing something.
有一阵子因为都很忙，忙得来好像连吵架的时间都没有，然后会想到啊，那过一阵子好像把这一阵忙过了，然后我们再坐下来好好谈一谈，好好说一说。但是那个过一阵子好像总是不会到来，他总是会有做不完的工作，孩子总是会需要你，那好像就很难得有时间专门坐下来聊。
我们就会安排在比如说周末的上午，然后等上课去了以后，然后呢我们专门花不出时间，然后来聊。
哪怕吵架好像也 OK 的，只要有时间来连接。对，原来最怕的好像也不吵，但是有点渐行渐远了，就关系有点疏远了，因为没有时间来这样连接在一起。
So, the first hindrance to good communication is failing to make time to connect with each other. The second hindrance is failing to talk about our feelings.
There's a danger in marriage of communicating only about the day-to-day aspects of life, of talking only at the most superficial level. Did you see that post from your sister? Or the trains are so frustrating? Or what time are your parents coming over? Being open with each other and sharing our innermost thoughts and feelings is essential for building a strong marriage.
You can search pain when running, or husband always late home, or wife more in love with the gym than with me. But there's no substitute for talking to each other about what you're each feeling. And some people have to learn this as they have no model from their upbringing.
Mark?
We met in a primary school in Poland. Michael was a DJ and had a crush on me.
We were in the same year, so it was just for the fun, for the school discos. And I would always play a slow song and run to get Marta for the slow dance.
We didn't see each other for like 4 years, and then we saw each other on the street, and Michael invited me for a concert. And that's how it started, and after 5 months we decided to move to Scotland together.
I never really heard my parents speaking about issues in front of me. I never seen how a married couple actually deals with problems, and I had to learn it kind of at the deep end, you know. That was the hardest bit for me. I haven't had the experience of being in a relationship in a way that I can openly speak about my feelings. I had to learn it, and it was a process, and it took actually quite a while. And it's still, at some situations, I am still reminding myself, like, Marta is actually your wife, she's your friend, you know? You don't have to hide things from her.
It was frustrating. We had lots of arguments about it. That, you know, I can see something is going on, but you don't want to share it with me, and why? And that kind of felt offensive to me, that he didn't feel like he can open up. Yeah, I think it's listening that made the change, rather than trying to start with answers and advice.
If you're trying to solve a problem, before I can express my emotions, you know, that kind of cuts it halfway. And I really want to express myself and then deal with the problem.
In my culture, we often think that reasoning is more important than expressing feelings. In a marital relationship, expressing feelings is so important. We use a very simple phrase. In Chinese, we say 说出来问明白 means speak out, ask. One speak, another ask. You speak out what you feel, what you think, so that other people would understand you. Without concealing it, hiding it, we let ourselves to be like water flowing smoothly without accumulating a lot of pent-up emotions. When you feel misunderstood, feel ignored, mistreated, you just ask. When we ask, we would let our relationship go in smoothly, like flowing water. Because we do not guess what other people would think about us, would feel about us. I think that's a very good way of communication.
We may find it difficult to communicate at the level of our feelings for a number of reasons. Perhaps because we feel inadequate or vulnerable, or we get very defensive or are fearful of how our partner will respond. Or there may be other reasons from our background or personality that mean we find talking at the level of our feelings difficult. But it could just be busyness. We don't allow the time to do so, or hiding our feelings has become habitual and telling our partner what's going on inside feels foreign and awkward.
But we want to encourage you to dare to trust your partner and to start disclosing your feelings to him or her by saying, I feel excited about whatever it is, or I feel sad, or I couldn't sleep last night because I was worrying about this or that. This is vital for meaningful communication as a couple. And if you know that your partner struggles to express their feelings, it's really important for you to listen without judging or criticizing them, because it may well have taken real courage for them to disclose deep and personal things.
we'd like you to turn to the next conversation in your journal called Effective Talking. Tell your partner how you tend to communicate when you're feeling anxious or cross or under pressure. Are you imitating what you saw as you were growing up? Then ask your partner how difficult or easy it is for them to talk about their inner thoughts, their attitudes and their emotions. And find out if they were encouraged to talk about their feelings during their upbringing.
We want to move on and look at a third hindrance to good communication, which is failing to listen to each other. Listening is of huge importance for building a foundation of understanding and intimacy in marriage. We had no idea about the power of listening at the beginning of our marriage. Relationship counsellor Gerard Hughes said, "The gift of being a good listener, a gift which requires constant practice, is perhaps the most healing gift anyone can possess. It doesn't judge or advise the other, but communicates support at a level deeper than words." When someone listens to us, we're likely to feel understood, valued, supported, and loved. It makes us feel good when we know we've been listened to. Whereas when we're not listened to, we can be left feeling frustrated, ignored, taken for granted, misunderstood, and unloved. Not being listened to is highly damaging to a relationship.
But equally, I know from personal experience, being a good listener is difficult, and that's probably because it's costly. It demands our time and our patience, and it may well mean we have to overcome some bad habits that we've got into. And most of us have some bad listening habits to overcome, such as going off on a tangent with a story of our own when our partner is in the middle of their story, or rushing in to give advice when what our partner really needs is our empathy, or reassuring, which is when we're constantly downplaying any negative feelings that are being expressed, whether that's sadness or anger or disappointment, in order to try to keep everything calm and cheerful. Or, the most common of all, interrupting our partner when they're in full flow. And speaking as someone who is not a naturally good listener, I find myself all too often falling into at least 3 of these bad habits.
I would interject with sometimes my own experience or my own something in the middle of what she was saying. Because for me, I'm like, it feels like, oh, I totally understand that, blah, blah, blah. Here's my story. But for her, she's like, you just derailed the conversation and made it about yourself. And then sometimes she'll like make assumptions as to what I'm going to say or thinking. So I'll like say, yeah, and then she'll jump in and finish my sentence. And I'm like, no.
He definitely brought it up, and it's because I would interject or just assume what he was saying. And then so he told me, and just was honest. So I've just tried to listen through the whole of what he's trying to say, to really get the meaning behind it.
I'm an engineer by profession, and my job, we're always thinking about solving problems, and I think that I'm pretty good at it. And I think all of the things that I hear have rational solutions that, if implemented, that they will go perfectly. And I have answers for everything.
I would say that in my case is interjecting. It's just having my agenda, putting it down, and not interjecting, like letting him finish. Quite surprising at the things that you learn from the other person when you really listen and be quiet.
We're both really bad at listening. We're trying to get better, but we're dreadful.
You tend to think that you know what I'm saying, so you join in and you affirm what I'm saying, but I feel like you're interrupting me, and then I lose my train of thought.
Yeah, I like to, agree and like nod and go, oh yeah, I get that. I felt that the other day. But Dan needs me to just listen. What I find frustrating is Dan says I interrupt, but I feel you interrupt. So we're basically saying the same thing to each other. I think we both have the same weakness and both find it difficult to see what we're doing wrong. Look at you nodding, smiling as though that's not true. This isn't one-sided. We need to get better, I think.
We're still working this one out.
Yeah.
My default is that I'm a reassurer. My tendency is to minimize anything negative that someone else is expressing, as I think it'll keep everything happy and positive. But I've gradually realized it doesn't help if I don't let Scylla or anyone else in the family voice what they're feeling.
Most of us have to learn to listen to each other. Some research into typical patterns of conversation revealed that the average individual only listens for 17 seconds before interrupting with their own agenda. Effective listening involves patience, allowing our partner to finish what they want to say. It means putting aside our own agenda and seeking to see the world through our partner's eyes. And it means making the effort to understand them when they think or feel differently to us. We don't learn to listen overnight. It takes lots of practice. But even the worst listeners amongst us can change.
I'm Tony Troxler,
I'm Susie Troxler, obviously.
and we've been married for about, 12 years now. I'm learning that listening to something, you have to hear the whole thing. You have to get the whole train of thought before you can just answer, not judge, but answer if an answer is required.
I'm Jit, and this is my wife Karen, and
We met in Singapore at the right time, at the right place, and we decided that this was something that we want to do together for the rest of our lives.
I do tend to interrupt sometimes. We grow in a family that takes interest on everyone, on everything, and so sometimes often we do interrupt, and that's just our way of being interested in the subject matter. I realize that there are times that I just have to keep quiet and not interrupt and just listen.
We would argue about stuff, and I'd feel like he wasn't listening and all that in the olden days. The way I know if he understands what I'm talking about is usually by whatever reply he gives me. Even when it just happened not too long ago, even when I was talking to him and he was getting ready for work. Not a good time to talk to him, by the way. Because his mind, it's 6 in the, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, he's trying to get out. And I knew I was talking to him at a bad time. So I wasn't offended by it. But what I thought was so sweet is about 2 minutes into it, he stops and he goes, "I'm sorry, I wasn't really paying attention to what you were saying." And I thought to myself, wow, we come a long way.
It's funny how when instead of giving me an answer, you ask me questions, that it's so life-giving when he asks questions rather than give answers.
It gets better with practice. It helps me when she gives me cues. So she'll say something like, "Han, I really need you to sit down because I have something to tell you." And then it's like, okay, this is serious. So I'll be very quiet and I can listen. So that's something that we've learned over our years in marriage.
In a moment, we're going to get you to practice listening to each other. But first, Scylla and I are going to have a live conversation in front of you to try to demonstrate what effective listening looks like and sounds like. I'm going to tell Scylla something that's been bothering me, and we're going to use a technique called reflective listening. Now, this technique may well appear very contrived, but it will show me that Scylla's listening and that she's seeking to understand me and empathise with me.
And I've got no idea what Nikki's going to talk to me about. This is not rehearsed. I'm going to listen and then try to reflect back what he said. That is, to say back to him the heart of what he's told me, and particularly any feelings that he's expressed. Now, if I haven't understood properly, he'll tell me again. Then I'm going to ask him, what's concerning you most about what you've just told me? Then I'll listen and reflect back to him again. Then I'm going to ask him, is there anything that you want to do or anything you'd like me or us to do about what you've just said? Then I'll listen and reflect back again. And finally, I'm going to ask him, is there anything else that you'd like to say? And I'll reflect back whatever Nikki says. So for this conversation, I'm the one trying to model effective listening, and Nikki's the person with the issue. So, Hun, tell me the issue that you wanted to talk about.
I wanted to really go back to what we were talking about earlier, which is our very different communication styles. And let me say straight away, I love the way that you're never short of conversation. I love the way you're so intuitive, so empathetic, the way that you sort of jump into conversations, whether it's with me or with other people. But there are times when I find it difficult, and it's when we're having a conversation with somebody else, or one or two or more other people, and when they're talking, you get the gist of what they want to say. You actually get there much more quickly than I do. And I think that is because you're so intuitive. But then you take over. You say what you think they're going to say. And I think you do it because you want to show them that you understand them. You want to show them that you're with them in this. It's part of your empathy. But I find it really, really frustrating, at times really irritating actually, because I want to hear what they think or their story in their own words. I want the details. I don't just want the sort of general sense. And I think sometimes people, they sort of agree with you when you've taken over what they're saying. And I get a bit embarrassed because I think, oh, maybe that wasn't exactly what they wanted to say, but they're too polite to sort of correct you or to stop you.
Okay, so the issue is around our different communication styles, and we've been talking about that a lot. And you said that obviously I talk easily, I'm more intuitive, and you love that.
Yeah.
You don't want to say you don't like that, but there are certain...
And I love that you're never short of conversation.
Oh, never short of conversation. Okay, good. And but there is particular situations where we're with other people, either one other person or other people, where actually you find it really difficult because I come in, and you think I do this because I'm kind of trying to empathize with them or to kind of help them get the fact that I'm with them and understanding them. But you find that frustrating, irritating, and embarrassing, because actually what you want is to hear what they've got to say. If they're telling a story, you want to hear it in their words, but because I've taken over, sometimes the people feel, well, they can't say it anymore because I've kind of summarized it.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so what's concerning you most about that whole issue?
I think at the heart of it is my wanting to hear people say things in their own words, whether it's an idea or particularly their story. If we're talking to a couple, I want to hear the story about their relationship or about their marriage in their own words. I want to let them finish, even if that takes quite a long time. And I think as well as I'm a bit slower at processing the information than you are. So it just takes me, I want that time while they're talking, I'm thinking it through and so on before I'm ready to respond.
So really the heart of it for you is you want to hear what the other people are saying. So if we're talking to a couple, they're telling us about their marriage or something like that, or they're telling a story, you really want to hear it in their words, their way of telling us, rather than me kind of helping them, interpreting it. Yeah. And it's kind of because partly the way we process is different.
Yes.
And so it takes you longer processing, and you want to hear from them and then process it, and then not have me talking all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there something that you'd like to do about this, or perhaps I need to do, or we can do together?
Well, I think certainly if you could help by letting the other person or people or me finish what we want to say, that would help. But I think as well, if we could work out together a sort of signal I could use when, oh, hold on a minute, my darling, because I don't want to say that, because I think that would be sort of embarrassing with other people. But if there was a signal that I could give to you, or just hang on a bit, just let them finish their story or their idea or whatever it is, and work out some way that we both understand.
Okay, so it's obviously it's me being more aware of it and realizing that when we're in a situation like that, just knowing that that's what you're thinking, but having a way in which you could indicate that's not obvious to everybody, but which we can understand. So if I'm kind of just doing it and not realizing, you can help me to know and remind
exactly. And let me finish my sentences.
and let you finish your sentences.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say?
No, that is it. Thank you so much for listening, my darling. Well done.
That's very helpful indeed.
Having a conversation like that is always helpful. And don't worry, I'll give Scylla a chance to put her side of the issue when we get home.
Now, of course, it's harder to listen when our partner is telling us something about our own behaviour, as we have to do at times in marriage. I can so easily go on the defensive and desperately want to justify myself. And this technique of reflective listening helps me to see the issue from Nikki's point of view. Now it's your turn, and you'll see the instructions in your journal for the conversation called effective listening. And this is an opportunity to take time to listen to each other. So one of you tell your partner something that's important to you or bothering you. And if you're engaged, it may be arrangements for your wedding or something else that you're worried about. And this is a good opportunity to practice expressing your feelings if you're not used to doing so.
The other one should listen, and you may need to contain yourself. Then reflect back what your partner says. Resist the urge to come in with your own agenda. Ask the questions in your journal to draw your partner out. Then swap over so you both have an opportunity to talk and to listen. practicing that type of reflective listening you've just been doing has made a massive difference to Scylla and me over the years, as it has to thousands and thousands of other couples in understanding where each other is coming from. And whatever topic you or your partner address for your conversation, that's not the most important thing about what you've done. Rather, it's about how it made you feel.
We hope you felt a greater sense of closeness and a greater sense of shared understanding, because communication at this deeper level is what is needed at the heart of every marriage.
We've put some continuing conversation starters in your journal that you can do between the sessions.
And we'd encourage you to keep practicing that type of reflective listening. It's a very practical tool that you can use over and over again to keep you closely connected. And don't worry if it feels quite awkward and seems rather contrived at first. The more you practice, the easier it'll become.
We're going to finish now with a reading that you may like to use if you're planning your wedding. Couples often ask us to help them choose a reading from the Bible, so we've compiled a list that you'll find in the back of your journal. And the first one I'm going to read now is from St. Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 4. St. Paul describes how we can communicate with God and the effect of talking to him about our deepest concerns and longings. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus.
We'd like to close this session by saying a short prayer for you and for your relationship. So please stay just as you are while I pray. Lord, thank you that you love us. Thank you that we can pour out our concerns to you and you are always listening to us. Please help each person to understand their partner more and more so that their love for each other would grow stronger and deeper day by day. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We're so glad you've joined us, and we look forward to you joining us on the next session.
Oh, we're rolling. Okay.
Face mask after this. So we've done the pre-marriage course. I said, done the why can't I say it? Pre-marriage. The pre-marriage course. No, pre-marriage. We've done the pre-marriage course.
No.
Pre-marriage. I'll stop there and you can cut it, can't you?
I feel like we haven't started yet.
I need to scratch my nose. Sorry.
They have a gag reel. Of like.
No. No.
Alright, some bloopers for us there. Well, who enjoyed that session? That was awesome. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. I did want to quickly let you know before you go, next week's session, the topic is conflict. So we hope that you can make it. Once again, if you haven't actually registered for the course yet, please let us know. And if you know of anyone who will be attending next week, they are more than welcome to jump in and join. Also let us know. We'd love to register you. So we just, I have two things, but firstly, we want to thank you so much for coming tonight. We hope you all got a lot out of it. We'll be praying for you during the week that you'll be able to implement these things and start practicing these things that you've learned tonight. So we, pray and speak blessings over your lives and your relationships. And then the second thing, we just need some strong men who would love to help us. If you don't have to go, we do need to actually reset the chairs back into the middle for Sunday service. So if you are able to stay, if you have to go, feel free. But we do need a little bit of help here, up to you. So if you are going to help, if you could just meet us over here where the chairs are, and we'll start unpacking the tables and setting the chairs back up for Sunday. So thank you everyone for coming. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Yeah, you can take your handbooks home as well. They're for you to keep. Keep your handbooks, guys. everyone, don't worry about the chairs. They're actually going to leave it this way and sort it out on Friday. Sorry, you're free. Bye-bye.